And at the end of the day, for me, there's a massive interdependency between the two teams in marketing and sales enablement. Marketing can generate leads, but if sales aren't enabled to catch them, then there's limited value.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer, sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
This episode is sponsored by Zant, the enterprise leader in sales engagement. Zant has authored the definitive guide to sales cadence. Get your copy at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. Hey there, welcome to episode 273 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. And my guest on this episode is Genefa Murphy, SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Micro Focus. Genefa, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Hey, Bernie, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited about our conversation. It's one of my favorite topics, sales enablement. We're going to talk about why sales enablement belongs in marketing. But as always, as you know, I always like to begin with an introduction to your company, Micro Focus, and of course, your role there as SVP and CMO, and maybe a little bit about your journey and your background leading up to that role.
Sure thing. So at Micro Focus, essentially, we are one of the world's largest enterprise software companies, and we help our customers with digital transformation. Essentially, we help our customers to deliver 4 key outcomes that we think are essential for digital transformation: speed, agility, security, and insights. So as CMO of a large enterprise company, that gives me a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge. I originally came into my role not through a traditional marketing path, but actually through a product management background. So I held various product management roles dealing with engineering. And then I moved into the marketing and enablement realm, eventually ending up at CMO. If I go all the way back, my heritage is really in business and computer science. That's what my degree was in. And I actually followed that up with a PhD, which looks at consumer adoption of new technology. I wanted to do something practical that could be applied in the real world. And that brought together computer science, psychology, sociology. And I still find myself using that in my CMO role today.
I can imagine that you're using all of those in your role as CMO of a large enterprise software company. That's a fascinating background. Boy, we could just do a whole podcast episode just on your career journey, Genefa. I think it's fascinating. So thank you for that, keeping that brief, so we can get to the topic of sales enablement, but specifically why sales enablement belongs in marketing. And I want to begin with your definition of sales enablement. How do you define sales enablement?
Yeah, so I think with sales enablement, it's actually really interesting to break down the words. So, first of all, if you take sales, I think you've got to look at, well, who is sales? Is it just sales? Is it pre-sales? Is it support sales? Is it customer success? Or is it all of the above? And we at Micro Focus and I believe that it is all of the above. And you have to, just like you segment your customers, you have to segment your sales teams and deliver the right enablement for them so that they can be successful. Then if you look at enablement, I think you have to distinguish between training and enablement. And often those are things which get confused. So training for me, it results in a sales force who are knowledgeable. Right? They've been trained on a specific topic or a specific activity, a thing. They become very knowledgeable on it. Enablement then takes those salespeople and shows them how to use that knowledge to turn it into action. And in most cases, that's how do you generate pipeline? How do you convert that to revenue? How do you deal with objections? So I think that's a really important thing, is to look at what are you actually trying to encompass under the sales enablement banner. And different people will look at it from different aspects. But for me, it's about the full gambit of sales segmentation, and it's about training and enabling.
I like your comment about the segmentation. As a marketer, we can all relate to that, right? Because we segment everything we do in marketing and in terms of our target audience and so forth. And so in this case, this is an internal audience and you're segmenting them so that you can plan your enablement properly. Love that. Fantastic. Great insight. So let's talk about then sales enablement belonging in marketing. What's your rationale for that?
Yeah, so I think if you look today, the sales process is buyer led. And who are the two biggest constituents in influencing that journey, that persona? It's marketing and sales. And if you look today, a large portion of the buyer's journey is done online. Nearly 70% of it is actually done online. And marketing are tasked with how do I get people to understand the message? How do I create a compelling message? And then sales have to take that and convert that into then the opportunities that they pursue. So to me, bringing those two constituents closer together really helps with the alignment. Now, you could say that fine, you can get that alignment in separate organizations, but I do think that today there are a lot of organizational barriers that often get in the way of collaboration, and that leads to duplication, cost, and ultimately a fragmented customer experience. So I think the reason why it belongs in marketing is because then we could all be looking at that same customer journey that's not linear, that's very iterative. We can be creating a strong continuous feedback loop. We can make sure that everyone's singing from the same song sheet. The message that we're putting out there from a marketing point of view is the same message that we're enabling our reps on, and we're helping bring those things closer together.
And then how does that occur at Microfocus from an alignment with sales? This is a topic we've discussed so many times here in the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. In some respects, there's common threads across all brands, but then there's also distinctions because every company has its own unique culture and DNA and so forth. So at Microfocus, how are you actually threading that all together to be aligned with sales from an enablement standpoint?
Enablement sits within my realm, and ultimately, the way I look at it is it's my job to build a contract with our CRO, our Chief Revenue Officer, and his organization. And it's a contract based on give and take. There are certain things that I will expect the sales team to do, and there should be certain things that certain SLAs that they expect me and my organization to uphold. So, for example, one of the key things is creating this healthy tension between what do we want sales to be enabled on and what do sales think they need to be enabled on. And then once we actually get that agreement, making sure that we put a solid enablement plan and course out there, and then we track it and we follow it up. And we're having that continuous feedback loop. So I think it's like any type of buyer and seller relationship. I'm selling enablement to the sales team. They're my consumers, they're my customers, and then vice versa. That means that they have expectations of me as a provider to them.
Jennifer, I'm fascinated by your choice of words. You called it creating a healthy tension.
Mhm.
I would think you use those words intentionally. Can you unpack that a little bit more? What do you mean by that healthy tension?
Yeah, so I think you can look at this in multiple different roles across the organization. The role, for example, between R&D and product management, the role between product management and product marketing. And I think it's the same when you look at sales enablement and sales, because there needs to be a healthy tension. And what I mean by that is it shouldn't always be everyone getting along together, everyone saying the same thing. That's the ideal utopia. That's not reality. And the reality is that both parties have to push back on one another in order to get to the right outcome. So in sales enablement, we've got people who are enablement and training experts. A lot of them have come from a selling background, so they know the life of the salesperson that they're now building enablement for, but they are subject matter expertise is in the enablement and training field. Then you've got the sales guys who, their expertise is selling, knowing how to sell, knowing how to convince the customer, knowing how to challenge the customer. And both parties need to respect the subject matter expertise and the function that each can provide, but they shouldn't be afraid to challenge one another in saying that maybe something needs to be done differently.
Okay. Tell me about your concept that you mentioned to me in planning for the recording about sales councils. What's that about?
So let me take a step back for a moment. A few months ago, we had a challenge here at Microfocus that we wanted to roll out a brand new sales methodology. One consistent methodology that we rolled out across all of our 3 regions and across our entire sales force. And when we looked at that, we said, well, what's the best way that we could actually roll that out? And we realized that we have to create that strong contract between the enablement team who were building the sales methodology based on all of their experiences, and the sales team who were ultimately going to be the consumers of the methodology. So we developed what we call the Sales Council, and it was representatives from all the different functions of sales. So not just the sellers, but also the first line managers, the sales operations, the sales assist people, or the LDRs, the lead development reps, all people who came together to give their different opinions and perspectives, so that as we were building out the course, we had a sounding board of people that we could go to bring a different lens and a different view on the enablement that was being created and the methodology that was being rolled out. And also, it helped us to create change agents who could actually then go be advocates back out into the enterprise to help sell internally the methodology and the approach that we were taking. There's always going to be naysayers, in particular when it comes to sales methodologies. Sales reps who have been there, they've done that, they've looked at different methodologies.
Yeah.
And so I think that notion of the council, not just as being a sounding board, but really pulling holes in the methodology that we were creating so that they then felt comfortable to go be advocates for it out into the broader sales force.
To build advocates. I love that. And refresh me on the approximate size of your sales team. It's pretty substantial, right?
Yeah, so it's around about 3,000 across all the various different functions that you can encompass within the sales umbrella.
Okay. And then in terms of the people that you have in the sales enablement function, why don't you unpack that a little bit? You've already alluded to it a little bit, but if you could just give us a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, various different people. So we've got people who've come from sales, right? They've been long-term sellers. They've said, hey, listen, I want to get in the enablement game. I'm done with selling. I now want to help take my knowledge, my training, to go back to those initial words, and apply them so that I can actually help others. So we've got people who come from a sales background who are now more on the enablement side and sort of imparting their knowledge, using their history, using their experience to make it real for the new sellers coming into the organization. And then we've got people who are much more from a enablement, a training function, who know how to design courses. So we've got people who design the courses, and then we've got people who are the subject matter experts. And the course design is actually really important. I mean, just this morning, I was speaking to my enablement lead, and we were talking about how people often have a perception of what type of training should be used. And really, you have to again look at your audience and your objective and what type of training is going to meet the needs of that audience and is going to deliver that outcome and objective. And sometimes we try and apply a one size fits all. And so that's why I believe
Mhm.
it's equally important to not just have the SMEs who can run the enablement, but the people who can design and plan it effectively as well.
Hmm. And then what about on the deliverability side or the delivery of the actual course content? With a 3,000 person sales organization, how do you achieve deliverability?
It's an ongoing challenge for sure, and we've really tried to make a switch in the past year to much more virtual enablement. We've had mixed reaction to that. I think what we've really got to do is, again, it goes back to that healthy tension, having a good collaborative conversation with sales about what do they want, what's the priority, when does it need to be delivered, and what's the best way to actually being able to deliver it. Is it a face-to-face workshop where we get together people in a hub? Is it a virtual instructor-led training, or is it self-service, self-paced training, but then you have a human element on top of it? So as I mentioned, in order to get scale, one of the things we've moved to is much more virtual enablement. But what we found as we were rolling that out is actually we still needed to bring that human element in. So we introduced something like a clinic, you can think of it, where we would task the team with doing the virtual enablement over a certain course and period of time. And then we would have in-person or on the phone clinics that would happen once a week where people could come and drop in and actually speak to a person to try and walk through a problem that they were maybe having as they were going through the enablement course.
Sounds very much like the training that we deliver at Vengreso, virtual instructor-led training. It's kind of the trifecta of content that you deliver through a digital platform, and then instructor-led training, and then the coaching, or you call them the phone clinics or
Exactly.
in-person clinics. Yeah, terrific. Yeah, pretty much the same principle. Every sales rep executes a cadence when they reach out via email, phone, or social media to initiate a conversation with a potential prospect. The art of a cadence is determined based on a myriad of factors, fueled primarily by sales reps' intuition regarding the company and contact that's being pursued. However, there are a lot of questions that aren't always clear when initiating a conversation and creating a successful cadence. Zant has authored the definitive guide to sales cadence. This ebook answers questions such as how many times should the rep attempt contact, how long should the rep wait between attempts, what methods are most effective, and many more. Download your free copy of the definitive guide to sales cadence at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. What about the role of content in sales enablement? Let's talk about that because, as you know, we talked about this in the planning. Salespeople need content. So, where does that fit into your sales enablement game plan?
We have no shortage of content. I think the key thing is understanding what is the right content that you place at the right time. And so that's really where the bigger challenge is. You know, we have all different types of content, from competitive battle cards to buyer profiles and personas, buyer paths that help you bridge from point A to point B, competitive intel, sales flows, all different types of things, you know, objection handling, questions, door openers. But really, where I actually want my team to spend more time and where they are spending more time is how do we effectively get that content into the hands of the sales teams, and also making sure that we're giving them the right content for the stage at which the buyer's journey. You know, as marketers, you think about a buyer's journey all the time, right? Top of the funnel,
Right.
bottom of the funnel. And for some reason, when it gets to enablement, we sometimes forget that buyer's journey. And so for me, I like to apply the buyer's journey lens to both what we're creating from a marketing perspective and what we're creating from an enablement perspective, and look for places where we can reuse. I mean, a lot of bottom of the funnel content like case studies are perfect for sales enablement. And if you just make a conscious effort to take a step back and say, well, what is all the content that we have and how can we reuse it? You actually start to reinforce messages a lot more effectively. You avoid duplication, you increase consistency, and again, you avoid as much as possible that fragmented customer experience.
Yeah, and if you're leveraging the experience of the people on your enablement team who come from sales, that's very valuable because they can give you that lens of having experienced all aspects of the sales process and the buyer's journey. So them coupled with the talent that you have on the training side can really just be a tremendous kind of a home run scenario for you, Genefa. Would you agree?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, one of the best pieces of content I've seen come out of the team and being used is what we call the anatomy of a deal, right? So it takes a little bit of the what, the value prop, the message, the differentiator, but it partners it with the how, right? How did you win this deal? What were the objections? What was the flow? How did you get from persona A to persona B? How did you get from a mid level manager to a C level person? What were the actual steps that you took? creating content like that, you can only do that if you have people who understand the sales journey, who've lived and breathed it, because what you put down for a sales journey on a piece of paper is very different to what often happens in front of the customer.
Exactly. Plus, there's a credibility factor, right? The sales team is going to embrace the training when the training is legit, it's real, because
Mm-hmm.
it comes from people who've walked the walk and talked the talk, and they have the experience to show for it. So the credibility factor is huge.
Yeah, transparency and honesty, I think, in sales enablement content is a huge thing. And also getting people comfortable with challenging. So we do use the challenger methodology. So teach, tailor, and take control. We use that as a methodology embedded within our broader enablement and marketing objectives. But that's a really hard thing to get people comfortable with, to walk into a customer and be ready to challenge them, be ready to push back, to be ready to maybe even in some cases walk away from a deal, and knowing when is that the most appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's always it's a difficult thing for any sales professional to really embrace, but I think many people understand it's better to get to know fast than get to know slow.
Exactly.
And no in this context is the word no, N-O, not the K version of no.
Yes, for sure.
Let's talk about how you're measuring success. Describe that.
Yeah, so success comes in a few different parts. I'm a big fan of metrics, right? Big fan of metrics, a big fan of data, but actually success also comes in the form of a much softer tactic, which is, are sales reaching out to me and my team? Are they engaging with us? Are they talking to us? Are they asking for things? Because that to me shows that we've built trust, we've built confidence, that they feel that if they can come to me and my team and ask for something or give feedback, then that's much better than them just going off and building their own enablement themselves, because they feel that the sales enablement team can't deliver what they need. So that's the first one, which is a much more qualitative, soft metric. If I'm not hearing from the sales teams, then I know we're probably not doing the right thing. The other one comes down to quantitative metrics. So, training certifications. How many people are certified on the various different courses and modules that we put out there? And then, how are we seeing and are we seeing an impact on sales productivity? And sales' ability to use that knowledge, use that training, and actually apply it. So, if we see a group of people go through an enablement course, whether that's a face to face session or a virtual session, can we then look further down the line and say, well, hang on, are they generating more pipeline? Is their pipeline closing more quickly? Have they maybe increased the value of an opportunity? So I think for me, I look at both the softer metrics and the hard quantitative metrics that look at number of certifications, productivity. And then when it comes to methodology, I think the other element is, are people putting that into practice? So I join a lot of forecast calls. I'll join what we call our mega deal review calls. And if I see people coming to those calls with some of the tools and assets that we've put in place, that for me is a good sign, because as a CMO, you're not always on those calls. They don't expect the marketing or the enablement team to be there. So they're not doing it to pander to you. They're doing it because they're actually using it.
Yeah. I love the qualitative and quantitative approach, the fact that you acknowledge the importance of both. We all, of course, in this day and age, we all want to be quantitative, but the fact that you mix it with qualitative is really terrific. One last thing before I segue to my summary, and that is, let's talk about what's next. I mean, you've already accomplished a lot in a relatively short period of time, Genefa. So very impressive. What's next for you in sales enablement at Micro Focus?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's building up that muscle memory, right? We still haven't fully cracked the nut on virtual enablement. We're getting there, we're making progress, but I still think we've got some work to do. So it's building that muscle memory and that culture to say that virtual enablement is good, it can be effective. Then I think also reigniting the role of gamification in enablement to make sure that people see it as something that is valuable, that is fun, that doesn't have to be a tedious activity. And then the third thing I would say is bringing sales and customer training and enablement together, right? Because often the content we create for our sales enablement can be the same content that our customers are really dying to get hold of so that they can get maximum value out of our products. And that's an area that I think we have an opportunity to do more at Micro Focus.
Oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought of that. Terrific. All right. Well, we are at the point in the podcast where I am going to do a recap of our discussion. And the idea basically is for me to just kind of hit the treetops on the main points that we covered. And then I'm going to ask you to just elaborate on it with any final points. And then we'll ask you for your digital contact information. And then we'll bring the episode to a wrap, Genefa.
Great.
We began our conversation with a brief introduction to Micro Focus, one of the largest software companies in the world. You're focused on providing digital transformation to your customers. Your background is fascinating. You've got product management background. You have a PhD in consumer adoption of new technology, which is everything from computer science to psychology and sociology. And it sounds like you're using every bit of all of that educational background as well as your work experience in your role as CMO at Micro Focus, because sales enablement, as we discussed, is part of marketing under your leadership. So we began with a definition of sales enablement, and you said, let's start first with what is sales? Is it pre-sales? Is it sales? Is it customer success? Or is it all the above? And the answer is, of course, all the above. And the reason that you do that is so that you can segment all of the enablement aspects and make sure that they're delivered properly to each role. And you talked about the difference between enablement and training, and how you first need to have a knowledgeable sales force. And some of those people have come into your enablement team and they're delivering their knowledge and experience. And then, of course, they're able to help the team through enablement turn that into pipeline. We talked about why sales enablement belongs in marketing. And you said, well, it's because the buyer's journey is influenced by both marketing and sales. Marketing is delivering a message to the marketplace, and sales is delivering that message firsthand to the customer and then driving the relationship to hopefully closed won opportunities. But you made the point that the customer journey is not linear anymore, and you need that continuous feedback loop from the sales team so that everyone, and I think I'm quoting you here, everyone is singing from the same sheet of music. I love that. And also along the way, understanding what's happening with the customer and reducing any friction points, and really just the fact that marketing has that expanded responsibility of selling direct to the customer. And then really, as you pointed out, creating a contract or an SLA with sales, with the CRO. You make the point that I highlighted. You create this healthy tension between marketing and sales. I asked you why, and you said, well, it's never perfect. You want some healthy tension. You want both parties kind of pushing back on each other. You use the analogy of product marketing and R&D and the healthy tension that they have. So both parties really need to be kind of keeping each other accountable. And so we talked about how you're engaging sales in sales enablement through things like sales councils made up of people throughout the sales organization, sellers, sales ops, sales managers, LDRs, and you really want all their perspectives. You want them to be a sounding board. You want to be able to build a consensus to the extent that you can as you build out all aspects of your enablement function. And then you talked about how enablement is both training and content. On the training side, it's course design and understanding the audience so that you can design the course content and course delivery to achieve the objectives. And then on the sales enablement side, it's a lot about content. And we talked about the kind of content that you have and how it's really about having the right content at the right time. Things like competitive battle cards and buyer profiles and personas and competitive intel and sales flows and objection handling and door openers. And it sounds like you've got a robust content repository within your enablement function. But it's really about getting the content into the hands of the sales team through the right stage of the buyer's journey. And you even mentioned reusing content, things like case studies, and you mentioned the anatomy of the deal, where it looks at the what and the how and the flow of the deal, using, of course, the Challenger sales methodology, which you said you rolled out recently across the entire sales organization. We talked about how you're measuring success. I love the fact that you're doing it both qualitatively. You said, hey, is sales reaching out to our team? Are they engaging us? And that's the key thing you want to be watching for. You said if they're not, then maybe something's wrong, but obviously they are. But then there's the metrics, quantitative, and that's things like training certifications, How many people are getting certified? What kind of productivity are you seeing in the sales team? Are they generating the pipeline that's needed? Are they closing deals faster? Are they increasing the value of opportunities? And are they using the tools that you've provided to them? And then when we talked about what's next, you said it's really, I love this metaphor, building up the muscle memory by providing more virtual enablement. And you also included the aspect of gamification and the fact that gamification can be a really effective way. It can be fun in the enablement process. And how you also said that sales and customer training enablement can really be part of your future as well, because you can leverage the things that you've been doing internally within your sales organization and roll that out to your customer. If I frame that up properly, I'm going to end my summary there, Genefa, and ask you to elaborate or just make any additional points you'd like to make.
Yeah, I think you hit it, Bernie. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, there's a massive interdependency between the two teams in marketing and sales enablement. Marketing can generate leads, but if sales aren't enabled to catch them, then there's limited value. If sales are enabled, but marketing are generating the wrong type of leads or putting out the wrong message, then again, limited value. So to me, if you want to have a force multiplier, bringing these two teams closer together and getting that healthy tension is key.
Fantastic. Great way to wrap it up. Genefa, where can people connect with you online to learn more about what you've got going on at Microfocus?
Sure, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com, Genefa Murphy, or on Twitter, which is just at Genefa Murphy.
Fantastic. Well, Genefa, my listener knows that will be linked up in our show notes page at vengreso.com. And on that note, we'll sign off. Thank you so much for adding so much value. I can't believe how much we covered. We covered a lot. So thank you so much for being with me on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Bernie.
Zant, the enterprise leader in sales engagement, has authored the definitive guide to sales cadence. This ebook answers questions such as how many times should the rep attempt contact, how long should the rep wait between attempts, and many more. Download your free copy of the definitive guide to sales cadence at salescadenceguide.com. Again, that's salescadenceguide.com. Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, I invite you to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player. You know, we're available on all the popular podcast listening channels. And hey, I'd love it if you would give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. You know, we publish a show notes page for every episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the interview. Just visit our podcast page at vengreso.com, and that's Vengreso. And remember, just one S in Vengreso. Hey, while you're there, sign up to get the podcast delivered to your inbox each week. And be sure to check out the Modern Selling Podcast, hosted by our CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, I hope that you'll tune in again next week for another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.